Now, Northern Ireland is marking the 25th anniversary of the landmark Good Friday Peace Agreement that largely ended 3 decades of bloodshed. On April 10th, 1998, the Irish and British Prime Ministers signed the deal, which was later ratified by a referendum to set up a new government that would share power between Protestant and Catholic factions. Now, Northern Ireland is currently part of the United Kingdom, but many in the Catholic minority resented British rule and wanted to be part of the sovereign Republic of Ireland. Now, there are worries that Brexit may have put that hard-won peace at risk. We're joined by Professor Duncan Morrow, a political scientist at Ulster University in Belfast. Welcome to DW. First and foremost, for you, what is the biggest change you've seen in Northern Ireland in the past 25 years?
Oh, well, by far the biggest change is the reduction in violence. Really, before the Good Friday Agreement and in my growing up years, violence was an everyday experience. There were bombs, there were shootings, there was always attacks on property and people, there were deaths. And of course, it's not entirely gone, but let me say, in compared to where I lived, where it was really every day and a normal, almost everyday experience, it has entirely changed. So this generation has not lived with the tension and the expectation that there will be violence on the streets, and that's a huge change.
Now, Professor Morrow, power sharing is there, but whether it's functioning now, that's up for debate. What do they need for the institutions to work smoothly?
Well, the Good Friday Agreement was a very fragile agreement. It was against the backdrop of the violence, but it tried to make a new arrangement about the relationship between Britain and Ireland and Britishness and Irishness, which was a careful balance. And to make that happen, the local politicians would then work together in power sharing in an agreement. One of our problems has been that since Brexit, a new question has come into the Northern Ireland politics, which is the border. Should there be a trade border between the European Union and the United Kingdom in Northern Ireland, which would be a restatement of all the old divisions that were there? Or do we need to have a border then which, if you like, manages trade between Great Britain, so England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland? So that question of where the border goes has made it really, really difficult. Recently, United Kingdom and the EU have made a new agreement, the so-called Windsor Framework. It is hoped that that will be enough to bring the unionists, who up to now have been boycotting the arrangements, to come back into local government. But at the moment, that's not sure and not certain. And if they don't, then maybe we'll have to be into a new agreement or some kind of reform of the agreement.
You've just mentioned how Brexit has, we'll say, impacted the situation in Northern Ireland. You also were talking about a generational difference as well. There's a generation of people in Northern Ireland who've grown up without violence, without a memory of the past. How do you reconcile that past with the future, considering as well the situation that Northern Ireland is in at the moment with regards to Brexit, as you've mentioned?
Well, I mean, I think possibly one of the weaknesses of our agreement was it really didn't have a formal process for acknowledging the harms in the past and looking at the past. And so that has been an open sore, if you like, in Northern Ireland since then. One hopes that as the generations go by and people have more distance on that terrible period, that makes it more possible to make new agreements and to move forward together. And there is some evidence in young people that they do want to move forward together and have new issues together. But at the same time, this is a big issue and constantly comes back. I suppose there are proposals from the British government to try to deal with the past, but they too are highly controversial. And so I suppose maybe what you're asking is there a way to get over that will require leadership, that will require a willingness to face into some very difficult facts, I suppose, about what happened to people, and then a process of learning to work together.
Ledley Hall Boxing Club used to be staunchly Protestant. Today, young boxers from all areas of Belfast are allowed to train here, including Catholics. Young people in Northern Ireland often grow up largely segregated, with Catholics and Protestants going to different schools.
In here, them kids wouldn't bother with each other outside, but in here, that's just where they've got to meet each other now, they're mates. They would never have met each other just walking about the streets of Belfast.
All the young men and boys here are aware of potential threats.
If you're passing certain areas that are Catholic or Protestant, if they know you're Protestant, they might not like it. But most of the time it's not like that. They're sort of calmed down on that, and they're more forgiving.
Just around the corner, though, Protestant militants are being celebrated. It's their loyalty to Britain that defines these so-called loyalist paramilitaries, but still have a grip on areas like this. Some Protestants are angry because they fear that their British identity is being stripped away, and that Brexit is bringing Northern Ireland closer to the Republic of Ireland. But on the other side of the divide, many Catholics are hoping for reunification with the Republic of Ireland. Pat Sheehan used to be a member of the IRA. He spent 18 years in prison and was released under the peace process. Today he is sure that a united Ireland can be achieved entirely peacefully.
What I think Brexit has done is accelerate the discussion and debate around a united Ireland, because we have seen that the dynamo and the driving force behind Brexit was English nationalism.
Throughout Belfast and other areas in Northern Ireland, so-called peace walls separate Protestant and Catholic areas. Bombay Street is in a Catholic area just behind one of these walls. Since Brexit, residents have noticed a rise in tension.
It's worse, that's caused even more divide between the two sides of the community.
Once Brexit came along, people stuck in that relit old flames and hatreds and things.
Some politicians are blocking the regional assembly over Brexit, leaving a dangerous political void.
There is a concern if there isn't access to exclusively democratic and peaceful means of expressing your political views, that there is a certain logic in some people's minds to the use of violence to express political viewpoints.
As Northern Ireland marks 25 years of the Good Friday Agreement, it's hoped that for the younger generation, which grew up with relative peace, the Troubles are confined to history.
And for more, let's bring in now Conal Parr, an Irish political history expert at the Northumbria University in Newcastle. Welcome to the programme and thank you for joining us. Walk us through, remind us why it has been so difficult to reconcile Brexit with the Irish peace process.
Well, Brexit is the thing which is opened up the can of worms of a question which was largely kind of dormant and settled, really, which was to do with the future constitutional status of Ireland, basically. And, it was a very interesting thing that since the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, there had been certainly an end to sort of structured violence and difficult political, there'd been some kind of political stability in Northern Ireland, and basically what happened with Brexit was that you unleash something where a number of people start talking about the constitutional question again, start thinking about the future of the island in a way which they simply hadn't done for so many years.
And many blame former Prime Minister Boris Johnson for almost unraveling the Good Friday Agreement. How great was the risk, you think, under his tenure?
Oh, the risk was very, very high. Partly, I would also say, remember that the Good Friday Agreement is an international treaty and only two people signed it, the British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, and the Irish Prime Minister, Taoiseach Bertie Ahern. And remember that the Good Friday Agreement cements Anglo-Irish relations. It is that treaty as well as a peace settlement. And what we had after Brexit was a very poor state of Anglo-Irish relations, which again had been mended and were very positive really since the 1985 Anglo-Irish Agreement and the Downing Street Declaration in 1993. There's a group of steps there, and basically you had a lot of distrust between the government of Ireland, between Dublin and between the government in London, in the UK, and basically that's still being repaired in lots of ways.
What do you think is needed right now to make sure that the peace holds?
Listen, the peace is holding. There's not sort of full-scale violence like there used to be, and there's some important figures that people should be aware of. 160 people have died since the Good Friday Agreement in violent-related incidents of a political nature. In the previous 28 years of conflict, there were 3,500 killings. So the peace is holding. That's not the issue. The issue is more to do with the trust and the level of cooperation between the two governments, which had been very positive. between the British and Irish governments, and also in terms of making sure that the communities themselves in Northern Ireland do have a better political framework to work with. I think the final thing I would say is that it was a framework, the Good Friday Agreement, which was very necessary for the time, but it was never really implemented in full. It was never really adapted in what it needed to be. And that's the thing that the two governments need to do now. And there's some evidence that with Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak in place, that will start to be repaired.
Thank you so much, Conal Parr, an Irish political history expert at Northumbria University in Newcastle.
Handmade acoustic guitars from Loudon Guitars in Northern Ireland sell very well abroad. Most of them are delivered to the EU and the rest of the UK. Brexit was a shock for founder George Loudon.
One of the first things that I said was maybe we're going to have to move the workshops over into the south of Ireland, into the EU. Maybe we're going to have to do that. So far that hasn't been necessary, and I hope not. I'll maybe have a quick look at it like this.
Because Northern Ireland remains in the single market, Loudon can continue exporting to the EU. But some of the most expensive guitars now need an additional license when they are shipped to mainland Britain. Before Brexit, that was not the case.
In the end, we found out that there had been a small number of restrictions between ourselves and the UK, and directly as a result of Brexit.
While businesses in Northern Ireland are benefiting from being inside the EU single market, Great Britain is still Northern Ireland's biggest trading partner. So any friction at the border causes concern. The British government and the European Union have recently agreed to reduce trade checks at the border to a minimum. That helps importers in Northern Ireland, such as Mark Brown, whose deli in Belfast has been in his family for 3 generations. For him, it is more difficult now to receive some products, like certain cheeses, from small producers in England and Scotland.
Sometimes there's a delay. You don't know if you're going to get it, is it going to get stopped? And, the fact is I need that, very quickly. And if it does get delayed, sometimes you have to, return it and say, I'm sorry, but, that's 4 days being delivered. It's fresh foods, discarded.
And yet insecurities over Brexit remain. Some politicians are still unhappy, even after the recent improvements for trade with mainland Britain. They continue to boycott Northern Ireland's regional government.
Political stability is really important for all businesses. So I would like this whole question put to bed, as we would say, finished, sorted out, agreed, and let's get on with the show.
George Loudon hopes that political problems caused by Brexit can be solved so that he can focus on growing his business.
All right, for more on this, I'm joined by my colleague Clifford Coonan in studio. Clifford, I want to talk about Brexit in just a moment, but can you give us first an idea of to what extent the Good Friday Agreement has helped the economy in Northern Ireland?
Well, I think the Northern Irish economy is a transformed economy. It's a fragile transformation, and there's still a lot of issues there, but peace has completely changed the economy. I remember going there in the late 90s, you would get stopped at the border by the soldiers, there were constant security checks. It was very difficult to get anything done because the two communities were so at odds. There was high level of tension. And within a year, everything was gone. The border was gone.
Border now.
Yeah,
right.
You just drove straight in. Even that sort of thing was incredible. And it really has sort of, we talk about the peace dividend, and there has been a genuine peace dividend. It used to be quite a depressed place, and Belfast, for example, is a city transformed by peace, and the economy has really benefited. But as I say, it's still quite fragile.
You say fragile. We talk about the disturbances caused by Brexit and the disruptions to trade. To what extent could that further hamper the growth of this economy or even set it backwards?
Well, it's interesting. The one thing about Brexit is that it made people harken back to the days of the border, the idea that you'd have these delays, that suddenly Northern Ireland was going to be isolated again, and I think that's very deep in the psyche of the people, and that, that influences how the economy works. And I think that basically Brexit was a big fear. But now you have this ironic situation where Northern Ireland is going to get an exception in a way from Brexit. So it's going to get the best of both worlds, as British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said, which he's basically saying that it's going to be like it was before Brexit. So he's undermining Brexit as a concept. But in some ways, this does a lot to address that fragility.
What kind of pressure is Sunak and the UK under to smooth this trade, I should say, especially when you consider that US President Joe Biden is making a visit to mark this occasion, the 25th anniversary, and he's also made it clear that there needs to be some solution to these problems if the UK is going to get any sort of trade agreement or further trade provisions with the US.
Well, that's it. I mean, the US has been central to the whole peace agreement, the whole peace process in the north of Ireland. And a lot of that has been the fact that it brings significant economic muscle to the table. A lot of the investments that we're seeing in there are coming from the US. You know, we're seeing Microsoft, you know, a lot of the spillover even from the boom in the south is going to the north, largely being driven by US pressure. They've made it clear that if the UK allows Brexit to get in the way of the peace deal, that there won't be a trade deal, which the UK needs post-Brexit. So Biden's he's really pushing his Irish roots. So I think it's going to be central to how this plays out.
All right, my colleague Clifford Coonan, thank you very much.